every year, is the sermon after McCrest and the sermon before VBS. Because I am exhausted for both. And I definitely am tired. And there are several people here in the crowd or in Bible Hour right now who are tired because of VBS. And again, thank you for your work this week, if that's you, and for the support of this congregation. But I'm not so sure how lackadaisical a sermon you're going to get this morning. Because I want to talk to you about something that is deeply concerning to me. And it's something I've run into this week on top of all the other things that we were doing with VBS. And I've been thinking about it, and I've been praying about it, and it's not anything to do directly with this congregation. It's just kind of a status, generally, that I was engaging with this past week with someone you don't know. But it's something that angers me. And because it's so, well, frankly, it's just so anti-Christian. You ever run into things in the world and you see something being put forth as a good idea or common sense or just the way everything is, and you think, and it's just so contrary to the claims of Scripture that you just get mad at it. And you see it for how silly it is and how ridiculous and how foolish. And it just fills you with this righteous anger. To be honest with you, I felt not this past week and a few separate occasions, I felt not unlike I imagine Jesus felt when he rounds the corner and sees the money changers making the court of the temple into a flea market. Then he winds up a rope and makes a whip and starts cleaning house. If I had had a piece of rope handy and the person had been in the room with me and not on the phone, I might have done it. Because it is so antithetical to every claim of the gospel. And it's the issue of love. Now you hear that and you go, wait a second. And I want to be clear before I go into what I'm going to describe to you as angering. That love is just as important today as it was 2,000 years ago when Paul wrote, "Now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love." I believe the driving motivator of everything that God does is love. John even goes as far to say in 1 John that the defining characteristic of God that makes Him God is His love. He says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for the one who does not love does not know God, for God is love." That the gospel preaches love. In that same book, John also says that we know love by this, that Christ laid down His life and died for us, and that we too ought to also lay down our lives for our brothers. Love is a very real thing, and it's very important and central to the gospel message. But love can be abused, can't it? We like to treat love like it's one of those things that is incorruptible. That it is one of those things that no matter what the situation is, if there's love involved, it's a good thing. And church, that's just not true. It's just not. We read in the Bible that grace covers a multitude of sins, and we think that grace should be changed to the word love. That love covers a multitude of sins, but it doesn't. Love has been grossly misdefined culturally in our world today. Largely misdefined. Grossly misdefined. Where it has not become the thing that it should be. Love that speaks truth. Love that corrects error. Love that deals with people on the basis of their weaknesses, not their strengths. Instead, love has become what you see on the screen behind you. It's become a crutch. It's become the one thing that we can use as an excuse in any situation to justify behavior we all know to be sinful. Love is a crutch when it is misused, when it is misdefined. And we allow it to excuse things that we know are sinful. I think that that's a very important point for all of us this morning. Let me give you an example of this. I don't know how many of you have ever seen the dissolution of a marriage happen. Been in the throes of it, whether personally or as a spectator watching someone you love go through it. But when a marriage ends, it can be pretty ugly, right? And it is, and we've talked about marriage several times over the last few weeks because of the Supreme Court decision and then other issues related to that. And I don't want to make this necessarily about marriage, but I think that this is the perfect example. You would not believe, and I mean this, you would not believe the excuses that as a minister of the Lord's gospel and a Bible-based counselor I have heard in marital counseling sessions that individuals give for why their marriage is falling apart. Terrible excuses. You would not believe what I've heard. Things that if any reasonable person would go, well, that's just dumb, and you're right. Because the truth is, folks, is the way that love is known, not the way that it's defined in the Bible, but the love by the way it's defined in the world and by our culture is not just blind, it's stupid. I know that's a pretty harsh term, but I mean that term. To where, for example, how about this one? When there's been infidelity, and the husband or the wife that has committed the infidelity comes and says, it's like, well, I love them, and I didn't mean to fall in love with them because you just can't help who you fall in love with. Raise your hand if you've heard that. You know, that sounds pretty good on a Hallmark card. But coming out loud out of my mouth, it's silly. Really? You can't help who you fall in love with? Follow that reasoning to its end. When we don't really believe that. Do you know how I know we don't really believe that? Because when you get on the news and you get on the internet and you read about, did you know that there are women, this is bananas, there are women that purposely go out of their way to start becoming pen pals with death row inmates who are there for murder, and they fall in love with serial killers. We read about that, and the reasonable person, even the person who says something as silly as you can't help who you fall in love with, the heart just wants what it wants. That's a Selena Gomez song on the radio right now. You hear that, and then you consider these women writing these serial killers in prison, and you think to yourself, well, you could have stopped falling in love with that person, right? Or we hear about the woman who's being abused by her husband physically, and she says, well, I love him. And you go, why? What? Did he hit you a little too hard in the head one time? Why do you still love him? We know that's silly, folks. Or how about this one? Here's a good one. That's the height of foolishness. I deserve to be happy. How many of you have heard that? I deserve to be happy. Okay, here's a newsflash for you, folks. No, you don't. You don't deserve to be happy. I'm sorry if that's bad news for some of you, but it's true. Happiness isn't a right. Happiness isn't something that you get just for the value of being human. Happiness isn't something that you just like. It's almost like it's almost like happiness is delivered by a milkman. That's how it's defined today. Like where you're just sitting in your living room watching the game, and then you hear the doorbell ring, and you get up, and there's this guy that says the good humor man on his hat, and he goes, well, here's your happiness, and gives it to you. Oh, thanks, appreciate it. Happiness isn't something you get. Happiness is something you create, folks. Happiness is something you cultivate and you choose to be. I heard not horribly long ago a wife say that she was leaving her husband because of she had been forced to live in abject poverty because of his inability to provide. And by abject poverty, she meant that we had to live in a 2-bedroom apartment instead of a 3-bedroom apartment. She meant we have a newer used car instead of a new car. She meant that we didn't have brand new furniture this year. We have the brand new furniture we got 5 years ago. And I try to be as nice a person as I can be. And I try to let the gospel be preached in love. But I wanted to tell her, and Amy is here, and several of you who have worked in this program are here to say that you probably feel the exact same way. I wish there was a way. I wanted to look at her and say, you know what, I tell you what, you come to work with me next week. I'll get you involved in the Benevolence Food Pantry that we run out of our church building every week. I'll show you what poverty looks like. And she said, I deserve to have these nice things. I deserve them. Who's growing to hate that word deserve? The more I hear it, the more I hate it. That word deserve is just, it's nothing. It's meaningless. We use love as a crutch. I deserve to be happy. He deserves to be happy. You can't help who you fall in love with. I'm leaving my wife, my husband, for this individual. Don't you love those when you get into marriage counseling, for those of you who have done before, and you find out that not only is she leaving him, but she's already picked out the new model? Or he has? Leaving is one thing. Leaving for somebody else, that's a completely different thing. And you think, and you try to reason with this person, why? But you know what? It's not just marriage. It's not just marriage. It's every little bit that we use. For example, we use our love of self to convince ourselves that it's okay that we don't go to church on a regular basis. We absolutely do that, folks. We say, you know what, I really know I probably should go on Sunday morning, but I work hard all week and I deserve a morning to sleep in. No, you don't. Sorry. No, you don't. Who told you you deserve a morning to sleep in? Honestly, where do you have to be? Now, honestly, where do you have to be on a Sunday that is more important than being right here? Well, think about that for a second. Oh, I wish the preacher would stop talking. We're not going to make our Applebee's reservation on time. Because look, we use this as a crutch because I love myself and I love my time and I love my freedom and I love my schedule. But that's not a good enough reason, folks. There are people in this room. Now, and it might be you if you're hearing me. But there are people in this room right now where this is the only Bible that you're going to get all week. All week. What's more important than that? What's more pressing on your time than that? I'm not saying we shouldn't be good stewards of it, and I'm not saying we shouldn't strive as the leadership and as the elders and the preacher and the deacons, that when in the organization of this service we shouldn't try to hit the marks that what we have said to you we're going to hit. But I'm just saying, where's our pressure? Where's our emphasis? Are we using love of self as a crutch? We don't just use it as love of self. We use it as love of things. Or we don't put enough in the collection plate because we love having it to ourselves too much. Because we're gripping it too tight. And we do these things that are wrong. That are wrong, folks. And we excuse them with a 4-letter word. L-O-V-E. But look here at Romans chapter 12 as we close. Look what Romans has to say to us about this. We're actually going to go a little bit farther than verse 14, but this is the emphasis that I wanted you to have. Verse 9, Paul tells you, and by the way, my Bible has the chapter heading above verse 9 says, marks of a true Christian. It says it up there too. Look how he starts. Let love be genuine. We're going to come back to that in a second. But that's an important point that he makes. Let love be what? Genuine, real, firm, concrete. That's what that means. Then he says, abhor what is evil. Let me give you another example. I recently heard of a situation where a couple were getting a divorce. They had announced to their family they were getting a divorce, and one of them was leaving for another person and doing something awful. They decided that I'm in love with them, and I'm not in love with you anymore, and I used the whole standard set of excuses. You can't help what you fall in love with. I deserve to be happy, yada, yada, yada. They went to this person's parents as a couple and told them that they were getting a divorce. And this person's parents are also Christians. And you know what their response was? Well, we wish that you would stay together, but we love you both anyway. That's a crutch, folks. That's a crutch. It absolutely is. I love you too much to hurt your feelings and tell you what you're doing is sinful and wrong and could potentially send you to hell if you do it. Love you too much to tell you that. That's not love, folks. It's just not. What does the text say? Abhor what is evil. You probably can't find a much stronger word than abhor there. What does that mean? Hate, despise. It should be disgusting to you. When you hear about evil in the world, how many of you watched that Planned Parenthood video? Where this woman from Planned Parenthood, who's a doctor, is sitting in a restaurant eating salad and drinking red wine and talking about the sale of fetal organs and body parts, like she was talking about a football game or the weather or just macroeconomics. If that didn't disgust you, if that didn't make the bile rise in your throat, if you didn't hate listening to that, you might be a monster. Because you would have to be a monster like that woman to even think that way. A part of what makes you human has to die in order to get to that point. Paul says the mark of a Christian is to abhor what is evil. And he says, hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing what? Honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Verse 15, not on your screen but in your text. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. A quick word on that, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. We have to recognize what that means is that, church, in our dealings with people, He's not saying don't call sin sin. I think many Christians have interpreted it that way over the ages, like, well, don't take vengeance, don't get involved in other people's business. Other people's sin is your business, folks. Because sin does one thing and one thing only. We're not talking about a social disease. We're not talking about a societal qualm. We're not talking about anything that has anything to do here. Look, the truth is that in this world that we live in, that you and I live in, sometimes the bad guys win. In this world. Sometimes you can lie, cheat, and steal, step on the necks of the people below you, and end up a millionaire. I know you've seen that happen in your own life. That's what he's saying is not ignore those things. He is saying recognize that there is vengeance. Recognize that there is wrath. Recognize that there is a punishment and that there is a world coming where the person who does those things will not be rewarded but be punished. I'll tell you what I told the couple that I just described to you. When we were discussing, it's like, what do I do? What do I say to my spouse who's doing this? Like, look, you're a Christian. Stop thinking of this person as your spouse. Start thinking of this person as a soul, because the truth is we're not talking about losing your marriage. We're talking about this person going to hell. Folks, hell's a thing. We don't like to think that it's a thing, but it is. There's a judgment coming. And if you have people in your life who are living sinfully, who are not abhorring what is evil, who are fulfilling only the desires of the flesh, don't look in the mirror and tell yourself that I can't say anything to them because I love them too much. Don't lie to yourself, because love is a crutch when you use it that way. You are abusing love when you say that. If you loved them, you would do everything you could to help save them. Amen? Because as much as I love my children, as much as I love my spouse, as much as I love my siblings, my parents, my friends, my neighbors, I don't just want a relationship with them here. I want a relationship with those people for eternity. This world is going to be a drop in the bucket compared to the eternity that you and I face. And as we're going to talk about in our VBS tonight, there's only two choices. There's the light side, there's the dark side. There's light and dark. There's God and evil. You have to pick one. There's no third option, folks. And when you ignore that choice that is put to every human being, you are not expressing love. You are expressing cowardice. Going back to this, though, that first verse as we close. Let love be what? Genuine. Genuine love is never a crutch. Genuine love does not make excuses. Genuine love acts. Genuine love goes the extra mile. It doesn't let anything slide. Genuine love doesn't say things like, I wish this wasn't happening, but I love you anyway. That's not what genuine love says. What genuine love says is this: I love you too much to let you get away with this. To let you do this to yourself. To let you live your life this way. To let you make this choice. Do you remember what we argue about whether or not this verse authorizes capital punishment from parent to child? I think it does, but that's another sermon. But do you remember what Solomon says? He says, the father who spares his child the rod, what? Does not love his child. Why? Because genuine love hates what is evil, recognizes it, and does everything it can to cast it out. I'm going to admit something a little painful here to you. It's going to make me look like less of a man maybe in your eyes, but I like a good chick flick. I do. Now, I want to say this. I like a good chick flick. Stephanie watches those ones that Hallmark Channel makes. And those things, I'd rather spoon out my eyeballs than watch those things. They're awful. They're so bad. I like a good chick flick. And there's a couple of chick flicks that I really enjoy. But you know what I've noticed that a lot of chick flicks have in them? Near the end, they usually have that moment where, and it's usually the man, but sometimes it's the woman, where he realizes what an idiot he's been and how much he loves her and how much he needs her, and she's on her way to the airport. And then they have that montage, usually to a Gin Blossom song, where him running down the street, or commandeering some guy's video, or some guy's cab, or his car, like knocking a guy off a motorcycle and taking the motorcycle and going down, getting caught into traffic. Like Matthew McConaughey hoofing it down the bridge, right? The speech. It always ends with the speech, right? Where he grabs her by the shoulders and he shakes her a little, to get those womanly incorrect thoughts out of her brain. And he shakes her a little bit and he says what? He says, "Don't go." What? "I love you. I need you." And I don't know if you thought about this. Like if she's going for a job or something, she's making some decision of something that she wants, that speech always ignores her desires. Have you noticed that? They're always some say, "I love you too much to let you go. Don't go, stay." And then they kiss, and more Gin Blossom song, and credits roll, right? When was the last time you ran down the bridge for somebody? Because you loved them. Genuine love doesn't act as a crutch. It doesn't make excuses. It doesn't tell you lies. It doesn't let people you love do things that you know are wrong. Love runs down the bridge. It grabs the person. It shakes sense into them and says, "I love you too much to let you go." If you